We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, now in Albuquerque, New Mexico on 1000 KKIM, and now on the Internet in the San Francisco Bay Area on knookmedia.com. Our guest by phone is the poor, not feeling too well, former California Republican head, Tom Del Beccaro. Clay, you had a question?
Tom, isn't there enough money right now to put high-speed rail between Fresno and Bakersfield?
Kind of. It's possible.
Well, see, I think that would be a great idea, and then we could have birthday parties and special events and weddings.
The problem is the bond measure said that you had to, before you could sell the bonds to build any portion, you had to identify the funds for the entire project. They can't do that because Congress hasn't allocated the money. It's subject to future legislation, and because high-speed rail now, a majority of Californians don't want it, and the Republicans hold the House, and they haven't funded it, they can't meet with the requirements of the bond, and so the bond measure, and so a judge said, until you can do that, you can't sell any bonds. And Jerry Brown, Kamala Harris, and the legislature say, well, you're just being nitpicky. And A, you're being nitpicky. We're coming close enough to identifying at least a portion of it. And B, you don't even have the authority to listen to stop us from doing this sort of thing.
But I don't
that's really an amazingly dangerous concept. What they're saying is that only politicians in the legislature or in the bureaucracy have jurisdiction over this issue. So the remedy, if they break the law, is simply to vote them out the next time.
But I don't think it stopped them. I mean, they're already out buying up properties.
They are doing some things, yes. But in order to sell bonds, the legislature was allowed to, and I think they allocated $3.5 billion, which is more than the operating budget for the California State University system.
Have they identified anybody who's going to buy bonds at this point?
No, because they can't put the bonds on the market.
But even if they could,
until they comply with the law.
But even if they could, there's no one out there that seems to want to buy bonds that I'm aware of.
Well, that's not my specialty. Maybe they could sell them, maybe they can't. But they're being held up. Separately, the state has allocated, the legislature has allocated funding. As I said, they allocated more to this than the operating budget of the California State University system. And they have begun aspects of this. But they can't sell, they really need the $10 billion in bond funds if they're going to build anything. And that's being held up.
But isn't Jerry Brown above the law?
I think Jerry Brown was around when laws first started, yes. Is that what you meant?
I think he and Clay are about the same age. So.
No, I mean, it seems like in our government today, the leaders of our government, I don't care if it's in the U.S. government or any state government, the governors or the leaders seem to decide what they want to do, when they want to do it. Regardless of what the law says.
Well, see, that goes back to Tom's point about the rule of law. You know, some of these people hold themselves above this. Tom, let's expand this a little bit because, and I like the way you put this in your article. You were talking about this really applies to President Obama and the Affordable Care Act. He's doing the same thing. And there's no court challenge by Republicans.
And that could prove to be a very large mistake. You constantly hear these days about how, from the Republican side, that Obama's executive orders go beyond what's constitutionally permissible.
But that nobody's really said that in the past, have they? I mean, that's a new concept.
At times, of course, we had the whole War Powers Act,
right?
And big fight over when can a president commit forces and how much. Look, the guy who exploded in American history the use of executive orders was Teddy Roosevelt. I think the president before him did 4, and he did over 1,000.
You know, the one that sticks in my mind with Teddy Roosevelt was he wasn't allowed. He wanted to send the Navy around the world, and they said no, but he could send it to a specific spot, which he did, and he said, "Okay, let Congress bring it back from there."
Yeah, exactly.
So
the dangerous point here for Republicans is they're complaining that he's doing these sort of things. And their argument is, well, what are the Democrats going to say if we get elected and we try and do something like this? They'll be up in arms. In fact, they will, and they may do a legal challenge, and they may win the legal challenge. But if Republicans don't make the effort for a legal challenge, and they just complain, Obama's executive orders, like the NLRB incident, are just going to stay around, and then the Democrats will undo what Republicans try and do later.
Yeah, exactly. We're having a conversation with former California Republican leader Tom Del Beccaro. Tom, we had Congressman John Lee Boutier on a while ago. He's on Political Insiders on Sunday on Fox News. And he made I thought it was a pretty controversial comment. He said the reason the Republicans, two things he said. One is the reason the Republicans aren't doing anything is because he feels that the Democrats have something on Boehner and Boehner's afraid of them. And the other thing he said, from a legal standpoint, and I've heard two or three people argue with this, one side or the other, that once Supreme Court Justice Roberts said that it's a tax, it allows Obama to make these changes and kind of be bulletproof as far as Congress doing anything about it. Are either one of those statements true in your mind as an attorney?
In my view, neither one of them are true. There's nothing on Boehner. The fact of the matter is that most House chairmen, speakers of the House, are not that aggressive. Henry Clay was. Newt Gingrich was.
Nancy Pelosi is.
The Speaker of the House from one party and the President's from the other party. You generally aren't that aggressive. Tip O'Neill was aggressive. John Boehner just isn't that aggressive, which is unfortunate. I mean, I think he should do what Gingrich did and pass slim down budgets and dare the President not to sign them. We don't have that type of leadership. That's really what's going on here. And the media is stronger today than it used to be, but those are the type of things that are going on today. As far as it is an interesting problem for Republicans on what legal strategy to use to overturn some of these executive orders, but they have to make the effort and see if they can find a way. Otherwise, our system truly is altered system and not for the better.
Well, I understand that President Obama has passed less executive orders than George Bush did.
But they're coming in roughly the same area. Look, I'm not a big fan of executive orders, period. We have overactive government. We don't need all these laws every single day of the week. But not all executive orders are of the same magnitude.
Right.
The Supreme Court in 98 point blank said the executive branch the President does not have the right to directly contradict existing language in a congressional act that he signed and change it. And that is what's going on. I mean, his executive order is the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, says something should happen on January 1st, 2013, whatever the date is. Pick a date. And he said, no, it can happen a year later, which means he's taken his pen and crossed out a number and added a new one in.
Now it's 2 years later.
That's a different kind of executive order, which has been shown in court to be defeatable. Why the Republicans aren't defeating it, I don't know.
Yes, and that's the amazing thing, is you keep on looking at these freebies, and the Republicans aren't picking it up. We had a gentleman on the other day who has 54 employees. He's a chiropractor in Florida, and he's actually going after Obama for not implementing the law.
Which is one thing, it's whether an individual will have standing and able to do that. But you're right. They should be doing this sort of thing. The problem for the Republicans is they want the whole thing delayed. So do they sue and say, no, you have to do it on time?
Why do they want it delayed?
Well, no, they want Obamacare delayed, period.
Well, yes.
Yeah, but
that's been their public position. So are they going to sue to say to do it on time? That leaves them between a rock and a hard place. But they still need to do it. They could easily pass a law that says, okay, the smarter thing to do is pass a law that says delay this for 3 years and have the president not sign it and veto it,
right,
or have the Senate not take it up. That gives them cover. They're not doing that. They're not that aggressive. They're not as aggressive as Newt. They're not as aggressive as Henry Clay was with James Monroe and pushing for internal improvements. You don't always find aggressive minority party members.
Fortunately, one of the good things about the bill is we passed it, and now we actually know what's in it.
Very good.
Well, and that's the problem is we don't know what's in the 20,000 pages of regulations, which, somebody with no real-world experience started to draw up.
Yeah. So, Tom, we've got less than a minute left. What's next on the horizon for you?
Well, I'm writing a new book called The Divided Era. Explains how ever larger government actually causes partisanship. Mm-hmm. Most people in the media try and blame the partisans for fighting, but the fact of the matter is, when government does something, it makes a choice, and there's people on each side of the choice, and then someone who has to pay for it. And a government that does two things will find two partisans. A government that does 4.7 or 3.9 trillion worth of things will find many, many partisans. So as government grows, partisanship grows. That's a historical maxim. That's where we are today. I give examples of that and also some ideas on how we can curtail it.
Yeah, well, let us know when the book comes out. And, Tom, as we get closer to the primaries, we'd love to have you back on because I love your insight. There's a lot we need to talk about.
Great.
Thank you for the time, and I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180.